So the intention with the dignity dialogues, Audrey, is the way I look at it is that we as humans, we are born with three things. We are born with a modus operandi that is innate to being human, which is choice. We are always choosing, even if we choose to make no choice, even if we choose to hand over the choice to someone else or say that we have no choice, we are always choosing. The second thing is we are born with an innate worthiness, which is what I call as dignity. Dignity is honoring of our own worthiness. And from that space, we automatically land up honoring it in others. And as we honor it in others, we start honoring it in terms of our planet as well. And so to me, this whole situation where a tree has value once it is chopped and comes on the balance sheet, um, and therefore forests have got chopped, and we are all impacted by climate situation. To me, that is a dignity issue, and there it is that struck me so much that I embarked on a search around the world for solutionaries that were coming up with solutions for some of the world's most pressing concerns, from human dignity to water to soil to air, a whole variety of things. And it is in that context that when I looked at everything that you had been up to, actually, we met briefly at Jonathan Granoff's home um, many, many years ago. And that is where it really struck me. Particularly at that point, we talked a lot about your interfaith work and the stand that you were, and the fact that you were. And what was fascinating for me that you went from being a legal professional to a spiritual leader, and pragmatically working on the ground with the United Nations, as well as like really down, working with the community, schools in Ghana. So you were bridging cultures, you were bridging faith, you were bridging policy and implementation. And all of that to me was wow, she is really creating solutions that uplift quality of life on the planet. She is a solutionary, and we must talk. So this is why we are having this conversation. Now, I would love to begin, Audrey, with this phenomenal journey of bridging and transcending worlds in this whole third dimensional reality that you have been engaged in for all this time. And you've seen this reality also evolve over time. Was there a particular defining moment that actually got you on this path?
Thank you so much, Minu, for that very important and significant question because that actually, yes, that moment changed my life. And that is the moment I met my spiritual mother. And she is integral to not only my life, but to the work that I have been doing, as well as the spiritual community that has gathered around from the very privileged ones who actually had the opportunity to meet with her. So I met her as the last person before I boarded the flight on my way to law school. I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I had just graduated from college. And of course, I worked that summer. And then I was going to take a flight. And a friend of mine said, "You are a sincere seeker after God. So you must meet this lady." So she actually made arrangements for me to meet with. And at that time, we did not call her Divine Mother. And she gave me this lady's name, and she even gave me the wrong name. But in any event, I had arrangements to meet with her. And when she opened the door to welcome me in, she took one look at me and she said, "You cannot serve two masters." In that instant, I knew exactly what she meant in my heart. And how that not serving two masters would ultimately unfold is, of course, part of my journey. So she welcomed me in and she gave me many beautiful spiritual sacred transmissions and in the language of the spirit that was totally unfamiliar to me. And we sat down and she launched into the most exquisite, beautiful exposition on the divine that one could ever have the privilege to hear. And in that one encounter, and I didn't say very much about myself, I told her I was on my way to law school. And for 5 hours, there was this nonstop transmission of the ultimate truths. And I felt completely and totally understood, even though I didn't say much. So she was just giving out in this beautiful, extemporaneous, spontaneous stream of pure sacred consciousness. And because she spoke very rapidly as well, she looked at me and she said, don't worry. You don't have to try to remember what I'm telling you with your mind. I've transmitted everything to you, spirit to spirit, heart to heart, infinite to infinite, and not mind to mind. So, whatever you may need of what I have transmitted to you will spontaneously arise when you need it. And she was absolutely true to her word as my journey unfolded. Whenever situations would come up, her transmission would spontaneously arise, and I would know to come within and meditate on that sacred transmission. And just the most amazing, miraculous things would happen. So, this meeting and this journey has many mystical elements. So, God, the known and the unknown. And one of the really important sacred transmissions that she gave was that the mind is not real, only God is real. The body is not real, only God is real. Everything in the external world that changes is not real, and only God, the changeless changer, is real. Now, did I understand the depth and the magnitude of these sacred transmissions in that moment? No. But since she had imparted it into me and it was incorporated into me, as my journey unfolded, yes, I have been able to independently verify every sacred transmission she gave as the truth. So, this has been a journey of immense beauty. And of course, she told me the beginning and the end of her life, but she left out one thing. I didn't know that she had left out one thing. It was for me to discover. And I guess that was some kind of signal for her that, you know, what she had told me and ultimately choosing me to lead the spiritual community that had gathered around her because people were hungry and thirsty for spiritual food. And so she freely gave these sacred transmissions. She made herself easy of access and available. And so, the actual transmissions themselves became part of the journey of transformation. So this really one meeting, and I totally fell in love with her. And so I started in those days, we didn't have cell phones. And I went to law school in Boston, and Divine Mother lived in Hawaii. So, you weren't going to call long distance every time because, you know, we weren't independently wealthy where we could rack up all these phone bills. So I started this correspondence with her. And it's a long story, but anyway, um, you know, these stories unfolded in my experience as a law student and my communication with her, and I kept all of her letters. These are my treasures. And so, in any event, ultimately, I discovered this one thing. And when I told her what I had discovered, she wrote back to me and she said, "Tears of joy flow. You are my spiritual child." And, what basically I told her was that I had found my chosen ideal, and my chosen ideal is Sri Ramakrishna. And she then started to tell me about Sri Ramakrishna, and I just couldn't believe it because that's one name she never mentioned. And I studied religion. In fact, I was a minor in religion in college, never heard of Sri Ramakrishna. And I was thinking, how is it that someone who is from Hawaii, born and raised in Hawaii, and she said she only had an eighth grade education, could possibly know about Sri Ramakrishna when I studied religion and never heard of Sri Ramakrishna? So anyway, that was like a sign for her. And along the way, there were many, many, many experiences that I have, never publicly disclosed. And ultimately, before she left her body, she chose me to lead the spiritual family. And, um, you know, then her words, "You cannot serve two masters." I dropped the practice of law to keep my promise to her, which was to take Sri Ramakrishna's light to the world for her. See, she lived the interior life. She chose me to go out into the world for her. So, this is how I left my law practice. And ultimately, there are many mystical aspects to this beautiful, beautiful story. But one of the things was that, the light had to come to the United Nations. And so ultimately I did end up in the United Nations. And that too, just that story itself is quite extraordinary. So this is the element of the divine hand moving in mysterious ways. So I continue to have involvement with the United Nations and was recently invited to be on the inaugural Women's Council for the United Nations Environment Program, Faith for Earth Women's Council. So, and there's also a whole bunch of other things that I'm involved with. But that was a defining moment for me that changed the trajectory of my life. And so I am serving only one master, and that master is God.
Gives me goosebumps. I'm just feeling waves of like rejoicing from spirit, even as you're describing this. Thank you for understanding your calling. And it's all about showing up, you know, and then stepping in and then choosing to step out, which is the journey that you have just described for yourself.
It is a remarkable, remarkable journey. And I do consider myself very privileged to be able to unfold what I consider to be a global sacred mission, as she had asked me to do, and I promised her that I would do. And, the incredibly beautiful souls that I've met along the way, and of course, within the spiritual community, and to see how the sacred transmissions in the language of the spirit that she imparted to me at the first meeting has continued to be articulated and given, and to see how people can apply it in their daily lives. So, one of the significant things she told me was that God is love. So, in the practical everyday living, is the actualization of the living reality of God in every loving thought, every loving word, and every loving action. And this is what we each can do every moment that we live. So this is very much dynamic, alive, and it is selfless service to the divine who is already within you, the closest of all.
Yes, yes. It's a very, very powerful remembrance for humans to reconnect to the love that is within them, which is their own divinity. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I mean, you've worked in war zones, you've seen firsthand displaced children, you've engaged with faith-based peacemaking. What would you say is the most pressing issue that, still concerns you at the moment? And then now I'd love to explore what you're doing about it and what else can be done in the world.
So, what is the most pressing issue? And I like to, of course, there's endless conversation we can have as to what's taking place on the global stage, especially now, um, which can cause a lot of anxiety. However, that is a symbolic representation to me of the profound challenge that faces our world. And that is the one thing that we have to really change, and that is self alienation. Okay. The profound loneliness of people who seek to fill themselves up with the externalities, whether it's through name, fame, money, and power, domination, and those things that ultimately strip people's dignity along the way. So, this self alienation, where people seek to fill themselves up with things that the Divine Mother told me at the very beginning are not real. Okay? These are the ever changing aspects in creation. And she said, anything that changes is not real. Well, if you look at the human body, you think that's pretty real. I mean, you can feel it, you can touch it. If you read the news, it sounds pretty real. But you see, the important aspect is for people to reconnect with themselves. This self alienation breeds profound loneliness because if you're not connected to your own self within, you you have a very difficult time living life with self respect and dignity and being able to have the process of discernment to know what it is to live life with self respect, that how you behave in life can ultimately dignify your life. It must start with the individual first. So everything is in to out, not out to in. So the inner transformation, the inner reconnection with the self to cut the self alienation. And the processes by which we do that is what many of the great masters have come to teach us and show us through the many proscriptions, okay, that they have given, whether it's the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not steal, lie, honor thy mother and father, or each sacred tradition has its own directives in how to live your life, basically with discipline and a commitment to your inner transformation through coming within and awakening to the reality of who you are. So the call to action is the call to come within and to really spend the time with yourself because in the silence is the power of God. So in the stillness is the power. So this is why it has, spawned many all over the world, whether it's meditation, the process through which you tame the mind to come within, and whether to read and follow whatever, scriptures may say in your respective religion, community, etc. But these practices are extremely important as ways to come within and reconnect with yourself to cut self alienation. So the great masters from the eons have really articulated, the way back home. That's capital H. And so we have to find that authentic practice where it is to come within, and no authentic master will ever take you away from yourself, but bring you more closely to yourself until you can remember who you actually are.
Yes, yes. Yes, it is true that we are a soul being having a human experience. Uh, and as a soul being, there is so much that is so worthy about ourselves, like it's just a matter of reconnecting to that worthiness, which is what brings you back home to yourself, and I guess address to some extent the self-alienation issue. I do recall my mother saying to me, this is like literally she was in her last few days, and she had not been conscious for the longest time, and she came into consciousness literally just for 5, 10 minutes or so. And she held my hand and she said to me, everybody's after stress, but the epidemic is the epidemic of loneliness. Do something about that. And a few minutes later, she was gone, which is what you're also alluding to. It's so true. This whole idea of loneliness. I mean, as a soul being, we have so many soul connections. You and I are talking. We're in different parts of the world, engaged in our own way, really super busy in what we are engaged in. And here we are, doing what we are doing, both of us contributing to uplifting the quality of life on the planet and addressing this issue, of self-alienation. Very powerful. In the context of peacemaking, in faith-based peacemaking, and there are various other peace-related efforts that are going on. You've taken on this this very specific aspect of the self-alienation part. Are there are there particular observations that you have to enrich and enhance the impact of at least the passion that people have to anchor peace on the planet and, dissolve conflict?
There is a saying, peace on earth begins with me. And that is so true. So many people have not taken the time to really understand themselves and the wars within themselves and the conflict. There's some beautiful scripture that says, be reconciled with everyone, with the whole universe. And, it starts within yourself, okay? And within your family, within your community, and then out into the world. So when we spend our energies trying to correct what we perceive as wrongdoing, and now I'm not saying that we shouldn't get involved in helping others and doing good things, of which, of course, there are many, many people all around the world who are doing just that, as well as civil society organizations, faith communities, who put together, food packages. They have, food that they give freely to the community. They have food banks. They mobilize clothing and medicines for victims of disaster areas. So all of this is being done around the world all the time. So, this comes from the good nature of people and their willingness to make this world a better place. But it also helps them to find deeper meaning and purpose in life. Because, as my spiritual mother said, giving is life. Giving is life. So we have to be able to find, meaningfulness in life by sharing with others, loving others. And this, of course, is expressed through how we behave in daily life.
You know what I really like about you, even as you're talking and everything that I have read about you and heard from other people, you have a very beautiful way in which you don't just highlight the problem. There's such a solution mindset with which you're approaching things. There's such a wonderful childlike curiosity and wonderment when you see a pathway to a solution. Like truly, like it's like quite an ageless, youthful vitality that with which you show up in the world. Not engaging with only highlighting problems. You don't turn away from them. They are there, and something has to be done about it. But your attention is more on the pathways to solutions. Is there any particular story that you have that particularly struck you, which was a pathway to a solution and really made a difference to dignity on the planet?
Yes, I want to share about this trip that I took to India. And I was taken to this very, very poor village in the desert. It was in southern India. And the most precious thing that they had was water because they had so little of it. And life was very, very difficult. So this doctor wanted to take me there so I could see a project that he was unfolding and to meet the people. So it was a long car ride, very dusty, and we came to this home. And it was a very, very simple home, and it was a dirt floor. And the lady of the house came. She was so gracious, so beautiful, very humble. And she invited us in and we sat on the floor and she brought out a glass of water. That touches me every time I recall it because her generosity of spirit is the wealth that she had. So the most precious thing in the whole community and for herself as well was water. And without hesitation, she offered this most precious thing to me as a visitor. That kind of generosity of spirit, graciousness, is something that no amount of money can buy. And here, in the midst of this very poor village, this kind of magnificence in this human being, by outward appearances poor and humble, but she was wealthy beyond measure in the expression of her love, her generosity of spirit, and her kindness. Yes. So that, yes. So that is to me the greatness of people, life. It's not all of the externalities and, the arrogance, which, can be an expression of like money, power, and see how powerful I am. And in that demonstration of power can demean people and strip them of their dignity. But for one such as this beautiful lady, she is living a dignified life. And Yes, that greatness is not defined by money at all, or name or fame. It is the essence of the person, power of that love within her. That to me is the beauty of the sacred life expressing itself through her.
Beautiful. Let's look at what's going on the planet right now. People are concerned about global challenges. There's fear that's gripping certain communities, certain people. I would love to hear from you. What are your guiding principles that can turn that fear into an existence which has got compassion, which has got, um, possibilities? Would love to hear what your guiding principles are.
Of course, currently, there's a lot of fear and concern, especially here in the United States, with many people losing their jobs and, you know, the tariff situation and this march to empire that can be very concerning, and the turning of the world order as we have known it for the last 80 years, shall we say. So things seem to be turning upside down if you look at the external world. And really, when you look at how these people who are doing these things got there, they were popularly elected. So, what does that say about, the collective consciousness of the people who would, um, invest their power of the singular vote to bring, such leaders into power? So ultimately, it is a commentary about all of us. So it is the screen of life that the projector, which is each individual and the film they have within themselves, projecting on the huge screen of life the collective consciousness of the individuals within that country, that society, and ultimately the world. So basically, what I'm saying is that each of us has to take responsibility for, as you opened up this program with, the choices that we make. Okay. We have the capacity to choose, so we must choose wisely. And every moment that we live becomes a statement of all the choices that we've made beforehand. And ultimately, how we end our life is a cumulative statement of all the choices that we've made up until that point in time. So, this aspect of personal responsibility, even as we study what is going on the global landscape, does not absolve us. In fact, it is a call for all of us to accelerate taking the helm of personal responsibility and minding ourselves, how we think, how we are spending our time, and, how we are interacting with each other, because it is a choice to go into the egoic world of domination, power, control, that ultimately strips not only the self, but others of their dignity, or to live in the very simple way that Mother Teresa said, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And that is the power of each individual who's a participant in the global landscape that we see externally, to be able to do here and now. All of eternity is in the here and now. And through our choice, every moment that we live, we become that expression of the power of love. to each seemingly little thing in the seeming ordinariness of daily life that actually can be the expression of the magnificence of life, as this beautiful lady in India showed to me.
So, Audrey, what you're sharing is something that is integral to the transformation of our education system worldwide. The education system doesn't necessarily take what you're talking about, what I'm talking about, as an integral part of how it is playing out. Would love to hear from you if you've either seen examples of education system integrating it, or if you have got any particular advice or suggestions for students and teachers and policymakers alike.
Well, thank you so much. UNESCO, which is the cultural organization of the United Nations, has incredible resource materials on educating for peace. And, I wish more people knew about these incredible resources, but they have unfolded not only fantastic research, but also created many practicums for the pedagogy of the transformation and the training of the heart and the mind. Because the actual preamble of the UNESCO itself, says that we have to basically change war is created in the minds of men. And so we can also create in our minds peace. So educating for peace, educating for the principles and values as you are articulating the importance of dignity and the values that have been articulated through the eons by the great spiritual masters, that one should live with integrity. One should not lie and steal and cheat. All those important values for living are the primary focus of these great teachings. And this is what we really need to lay that spiritual, ethical, moral foundation for our young people. And we should start early. And of course, educate their parents, who are the instruments through which these children are born, that they too must be educated and raise their children with an ethical, moral compass, that they cause no harm to others, that they be expressions of love and caring, and all those important values that make life meaningful and make life worth living. And that very, very beautiful book, Man's Search for Meaning, where the author says that how he survived the concentration camp was to, really discover that power of love that kept him alive. So that essence, and why is love so important? Because God is love. And ultimately, as spiritual beings arising from the great creator, from which we all came, to which we will all return, and we are at all times within this great essence of love, then we ourselves must become that expression. So, this is ultimately bridging again the personal with the global. And we cannot escape our responsibility as human beings, as members of the world family, that this is our responsibility to do, and that is to take responsibility for how we are minding our minds, our mouths, and our actions.
So, Audrey, if we were to fast forward 10 years, and with all the work that you're doing and so much else that is actually very positive, that is being proactively done on the ground, if you were to fast forward and imagine a world, what would that world look like? What would be going on?
Of course, it would be a world of peace. It would be a world that is flourishing and people caring for each other. Within, the first relationship, of course, is a self to the self. And then, so this is why we must work on our inner transformation and move out of self alienation to self awakening. And this, of course, takes self reflection and awareness. So, the spiritual journey back to yourself is an ongoing journey that does require commitment and discipline every day. So, because there are many external influences, and we must ultimately acquire the skills of discernment and discrimination to know what we have to have to build that strong spiritual moral compass, not to get swept out by the big waves. And, I wanted to share this beautiful poem by Ashish Ram, and it's called The Power of One. And I share this because I ultimately am talking about the individual's responsibility to the self, to the community, and to each other. But it begins with the individual. But therein is the power of transformation. So, this is a very simple poem, but it also, for me, helps to inspire those to never think, well, I'm just one person, what can I do? That your value, when you're blessed with a sacred life, gift of life, that you matter, you count, you have meaning and purpose in this world, and you must undertake your responsibility to unfold the beauty of your own potential that you were born with. So, my spiritual mother said, people look at the big oak tree and they think, wow, it's so beautiful, it's so strong, it's so magnificent. But she said, the real power is in the acorn. See, so within us is that beautiful blueprint of the unfolding of the magnificence and greatness of our own potential. So this poem goes, one song can spark a moment. One flower can wake the dream. One tree can start a forest. One bird can herald spring. One smile begins a friendship. One hand clasp lifts a soul. One star can guide a ship at sea. One word can frame the goal. One vote can change a nation. One sunbeam lights a room. One candle wipes out darkness. One laugh will conquer gloom. One step must start each journey. One word must start each prayer. One hope will raise our spirits. One touch can show you care. One voice can speak with wisdom. One heart can know what's true. One life can make the difference. You see, it's up to you. So we come back to your opening words, Mynoo, which was really the power of choice. And you're exactly correct to open this whole dialogue with choice. So, yes, we have every moment that we live the opportunity to choose and choose wisely. So, we stand within the field of infinite possibilities, and we are not limited in what we can do, but except by our own mentations of limitation. In actuality, we are infinite, immortal beings that stand in a field of infinite possibilities. And when we remember that the essence who we really are as spiritual beings is love, then that one drop of the nectar of love that you can share here and now with yourself, with someone else, can transform not only your life and all those lives you touch. It's really quite extraordinarily magnificent and beautiful, Mynoo. And I really thank you and appreciate so much your call to help us all to remember that as spiritual beings, the life that we have been given is sacred life. And therefore, we must always honor it, respect it, be grateful for it, and to amplify the magnificence of that life with dignity. And I thank you so much for this beautiful dignity dialogue that you are unfolding throughout the world through your beautiful work.
Thank you, Audrey. I'm deeply touched and immensely grateful for everything that you are doing. It took something for you to listen to that inner voice when you were just starting out, as a law student, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and then it was like, okay. So it took something, and your work is a testament for how we could all choose. You completed your law degree, you know, and it provides a leverage for this amazing bridging that is taking place in everything that you're doing. So deeply grateful for stepping in and then choosing to step out and amplify. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And may you be blessed in all ways, Mynoo, and your beautiful heart that seeks to share your love with all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. I'm truly blessed in your presence. Thank you. Namaste.